excited to do my presentation over the smart arm prosthetics, robotic arm prosthetics. And I'm first going to start out by giving you a brief history of prosthetics in general and arm prosthetics. So yeah, here we go. So the very first prosthetic ever found was this toe right here, and it was found in Egypt on the mummified body of a noblewoman, and it was made out of wood and leather. We think that Egyptians used prosthetics for more as wholeness and for more for outward appearance, not necessarily for necessity. The second prosthetic ever recorded was a metal hand used by a Greek general. He actually got the prosthetic hand to be able to keep fighting, and so he was able to hold his shield and continue going to war. Now once we get into the Dark Ages, this is when peg legs and hook hands come about, and those are mainly used on warriors and in the military, and then on the wealthy because no one else could afford these prosthetics. Now watchmakers also advanced prosthetics in the sense that they added springs and gears to them as well, which is pretty cool. Now once we get into the 1400s and the Renaissance era, the materials used were iron and steel and copper and wood. There were inventions to be able to manipulate your prosthetic. So now there are straps that go from your prosthetic arm to your good arm. And so these straps are able to move your prosthetic with your uninjured arm. And then into the 1800s and 1900s, there were a lot of advancements to the cosmetics of prosthetics. Prosthetics became more widely needed because of the Civil War and the World Wars and things like that. They started to be more concerned about how they look toward other people since more people were using them. They started to conceal those springs and gears and those artificial tendons that you had on your prosthetic inside of it now, so it had a smoother, more natural appearance. They also invented the suction socket, which is basically like it sounds. It has a suction around your residual limb instead of just using a strap or just trying to fit it on. They also started using aluminum instead of steel or iron because aluminum is way lighter than either of those. And now when we get into modern arm prosthetics, of course, the materials we use nowadays are way lighter. The plastics and the carbon fibers are much more easily to be worn as prosthetics. There's also 3D printed prosthetics, which are pretty cool. You can customize your own prosthetics, so cosmetics are also very important to people nowadays. You can have prosthetics of different colors, as shown here, and they're able to look more lifelike, so you can actually get more accurate measurements on your limb and have it basically match your other side of your body, so you restore that symmetry and balance in between your body for comfort and for appearance, so people feel a little less awkward. There are now also different ways you can power these prosthetics. The ones that are called body-powered prosthetics are ones that are controlled by the good uninjured arm, kind of like what I said a while ago for the old version where there were the straps that connected. It's kind of similar. There are straps that connect to the prosthetic and to the good arm, and you can move it like that if you obviously a cheaper version of a prosthetic. There's also externally powered prosthetics where they're powered by motors and buttons and switches, so you can manipulate your prosthetic by flipping the switches or buttons. There's also things called electrics that place electrodes on your residual limb, and whenever you send your nerve signals to try to move that arm, your prosthetic picks up those action signals and is able to move, which is really cool. Now this targeted muscle reinnervation is used for when you don't have those nerve endings left in your residual limb, or you don't have enough muscle, or that residual limb is kind of, in lack of a better term, kind of dead in the sense that you can't really move it, you have no muscle mass. So what happens is, for that, is the nerves that were heading toward your amputated limb, your arm or your hand, are now rerouted to a healthy part of your body. So for example, if you're missing your arm or your hand, those nerve endings that used to end in your hand are now routed, for example, to your chest. And so those are the healthy muscles, and so the electrodes are now placed there. So whenever you think about moving your arm, the muscles in your chest will contract, and that will send the message to the electrodes attached to your chest, to the prosthetic limb, and then you'll be able to move your limb even though you don't have enough muscle mass in your residual limb. Now, neural interfacing is more direct, so that's where the microelectrodes are placed directly into your brain to listen to this brain activity. When the patient tries to move this prosthetic arm, the microelectrodes in your brain can intercept those motor commands and can directly then move the prosthetic to what you want it to do. So now the big thing that people are trying to complete now is bringing back sense and touch to prosthetic limbs, because now we have done where we kind of completed the way of being able to move your limb with your mind. Now it's not perfect, it can be obviously improved, but you're now able to control the limb with your thoughts of moving your arm, and then those electrodes will pick up those nerve signals to move the limb. But now we want to start bringing back sense and touch to these patients, so they don't feel like it's such a foreign object on their body. They'll be able to regain touch and feeling and temperature and things like that. So one scientist is putting wired pressure sensors on the fingers of this artificial hand, and they're connecting them to sensory nerves that are connected to the residual limb. So what happens is, whenever you put pressure onto the hand of the prosthetic, it gives you like tingling sensation in your residual limb, and then it kind of gives you can associate those different sensations to the different hardness and softness qualities of the object you're holding and of the shape. Because if it's, for example, you're applying too much pressure, then you're going to break whatever you're holding. If you're applying not enough pressure, you're going to drop it. And so you want to kind of know how your limb is acting, right? You can't just try to control your brain and just be like, hey, do this, because it might, not do it correctly. It might squeeze too hard, it might not squeeze hard enough. And you want to be able to rely on your artificial limb without having to watch it the entire time, right? Because you have to watch it and think about, okay, now do this harder, okay, now release it. That's time consuming and draining on your brain. So if you can add sensors back into that limb, that'll be very beneficial. So now, also, researchers have developed this pattern recognition in which the prosthetics can learn the patterns of your movement. So, for example, the signals used to be processed one at a time, and so your movements were very stagnated and very short and like staccato, like they're more connected. It wasn't fluid, and so you can like kind of imagine how a robotic arm would seem like that, right? You would do, okay, now I'm going to move my arm up, now I'm going to contract my hand, now I'm going to release it, and it'd be slow, and it would be tedious because you'd have to think about every little action every single time that you're trying to do, and it would just be very choppy. Now with machine learning, these prosthetic arms are able to learn from the patterns of your movement and are able to connect these movements from one to the next instead of each one individually. They're able to link them, so it becomes a more smooth and fluid movement of your arm. So it's more natural, and it also requires less conscious planning of how you need to control this arm. It's a lot easier for the user and a lot more natural. Now, as you can see, this artificial limb right here is created by the support of DARPA, and which is the Defense Agency's research. And with the help of Johns Hopkins University, they created this robotic limb, which is controlled by these sensors on his arms, these electrodes, and it has advanced capabilities of his, mind-controlled movement and touch and sense. This man right here who's actually using this prosthetic is actually a researcher at Johns Hopkins University. It has advanced anthropomorphic mechanical systems and control systems. For the future, DARPA and Johns Hopkins really want to improve their bionic limb to be able to be more wearable for longer use. So it needs more power so people can actually use it for an extended period of time. It also needs to provide strength and environmental tolerance to things like heat, cold, water, wind, dust, so that people can actually use this limb out, for example, working everyday use and in the military. Because if you have a limb that's, worth millions of dollars and it's easily damaged, easily damageable, and then it's kind of useless, right? Because you want to be able to use it. If you have it, you want to be able to use it, right? And so they're trying to, like I said, increase the touch capability, the sense. They want to incorporate, your sense of heat, and instead of just pressure and texture, they also want to then start introducing, heat and cold and things like that, so you can feel like you have your limb actually back with you, and it's not just this robotic thing that's attached to your body. So, yeah. That's about it. Thanks for listening. Have a good night.